Echoing down through the centuries of history are the fragmented messages of former generations. Among these broken threads of man's legacy are the echoes of a major cataclysm that befell civilization, and indeed scrubbed it right down to the ground. Let's look now at one of the books comprised of writings from ancient days that recalls an extraordinary cataclysmic event. The volume I refer to is known as the Kolbrin Bible. However, that's just one name that stuck. It's also referred to as the Kolbrin manuscripts, and I myself prefer to just call it the Kolbrin. One researcher who has gone to great lengths examining the contents of the Kolbrin, searching out all available data regarding its origins and authenticity, is Marshall Masters. So for an overview of where this comes from, I'd like to bring in excerpts from an interview that he gave last year.
The Book of Manuscripts, the Kolbrin Bible, The Destroyer on your website.
Okay. Well, the Book of Manuscripts, the Kolbrin Bible, is an ancient text, dates back approximately 3,600 years, and I can just briefly give you the history. It's actually a compilation of two books, the Bronze Book from the Egyptians and the Coal Book from the Celts. The Bronze Book was originally, in its first incarnation, called the Great Book. And here is the reason why we have the Kolbrin Bible today. Originally, it was written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. The Phoenicians, they would acquire papyrus. Egypt was a big exporter of a papyrus. The Phoenicians translated the Kolbrin and they took it to Great Britain. And there the Celts really embraced it. Also, the Romans who were there, they embraced it as well. And at that time, it was not called the Kolbrin, and it was still the Great Book. And so it was something that was kept at the Glastonbury Abbey, with Joseph of Arimathea funded that. And so the abbey was burned to the ground, and the Celtic priests were able to salvage as much of it as they could. And so that was then translated, and the Celts took it along with their own book, which was the Coal Book. The Coal Book was written in the years following the crucifixion of Yeshua. And the Coal Book, the last chapter of the Kolbrin Bible, has a very brilliant biography of Yeshua and his family. I think that's one of the reasons why the abbey was burned down. After the abbey was set ablaze, the Celtic priests gathered all that they could and assembled it. What remained of the Egyptian texts, which were approximately 3,600 years old, was about 20% of it. It was really encyclopedic in length, the Great Book. And then what they did was they cobbled that together with the Coal Book, which was their ancient wisdom text. And then there was a society called the Chaldean Society in Scotland, and they secreted away this information and kept it from being destroyed. While it was in Scotland, it was translated into the Old English, such as you read in Shakespeare. Then that was updated into the Queen's English. And then finally, after World War I, the version that we have today that was the last translation. Interestingly enough, the entire text was very close to destruction during the Blitz when the Germans were bombing London. And it wasn't from the German bombs. There was a British housewife who learned about it, felt that the books were heresy, and tried to burn them. And so the society then took all of the manuscripts which had finished translation back to Scotland, and that's where they stayed. Then the book was eventually released in the 90s, because in the society, which finally at the end, it only had 4 priests in the society left, and one of them decided that was it. It was time to make it public.
And finally, we will now read from the text. Kolbrin, Book of Creation, Chapter 3. At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail. It breathed out fire and hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath, on the belly, was a hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings. The seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling noise, trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Men, stricken with terror, went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. Then it passed, leaving earth enwrapped within a dark and lowering mantle. In other words, there was total darkness. Now, we'll continue with this chapter from the Kolbrin in a moment, but it'll be worthwhile at this stage to glance at a couple more works of literature from the ancient world, as this will augment our understanding going forward. Here we have the Ipuwer Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian document. The exact date of the original papyrus is unknown, but its surviving copy was made somewhere during the period between 1550 to about 1070 BC. A large part of the text laments a horrendous catastrophe which has befallen Egypt, saying that parts of it have become desolate and that the social order of things that had existed has been turned upside down, with a recurring detail of a profound darkness that shrouded the land. Now let's briefly notice here an entirely different ancient text, and this one's from the Babylonian civilization. This clay tablet is from what is known as the 7 Tablets of Creation that contains the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is Tablet 4, which gives a rich and dramatic account of a horrendous battle in which huge cosmic forces in the heavens attacked and killed the earth. There's a lot more to it than that, and if time allows, we'll come back to it in a later video. We continue now from where we left off in Chapter 3 of the Kolbrin manuscript. Then it passed, leaving earth enwrapped within a dark and lowering mantle. The bowels of the earth were torn open in great writhing upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent the mountains apart. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick, black blood. So awesome was the fearfully aspected thing that the memory mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. The earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up in the midst of the land. The evil breath bit at the throat of men before it drove men mad and killed them. Those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust and ashes, or were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth, or crushed beneath crashing rocks. Okay, as we can see there, the chapter continues on with further details of this account. We'll wrap it up, though, and move on from here, but we'll come back in a later video to look more closely at the extraordinary events that occur in this narrative. For now, we're leaving the subject of ancient events to proceed with unfolding the unbelievable situation that our world has entered into in this present time. From childhood right on up through all of my school years, from kindergarten up through my senior year at Lincoln High School, the subject of our solar system would come up here and there. Through all of those years, we were taught the standard model of the solar system and all of its main players: the Sun and 9 planets, the asteroid belt, comets, the usual. There is, however, a stunning, remarkable aspect of our solar system that was totally unknown, undisclosed in all of the academic circles in which I was raised. Now, the incredible subject of which I speak is often referred to as Planet X. The intent and design of this video is to provide a basic overview and outline of this enigma. Throughout the past 7 years, I've been steadily investigating this subject and carried out much research and observations. Generally, my work and studies in subjects relating to this extend back a lot further than just the past 7 years. In the 90s, I spent a few years researching and compiling a book titled The Venus Legacy that deals with the solar system and certain catastrophic periods and events in ancient world history. At any rate, the focus of our discussion now is on a subject that comes under a number of headings. We've already mentioned Planet X, and other names are Nibiru, Wormwood, Nemesis, and the list goes on. For example, this specific entity is referred to in a lot of instances as the Destroyer. Here is an example of the way that the term destroyer appears in the Old Testament in the book of Jeremiah, in a prophetic revelation foretelling the apocalyptic return of this thing. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 7. The lion is come up from his thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid waste, without an inhabitant. Now the metaphorical usage of, quote, the lion, there in the first sentence, tends to obscure the meaning and makes it more difficult to understand what is being said here. One way to clarify what is being said is to read again, starting from the second line. The destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy cities shall be laid waste, without an inhabitant. These words in Jeremiah chapter 4 prophesy of the same event spoken of in Joel chapter 2, and also Isaiah chapter 24. Further extraordinary details of this prophecy are given in the Revelation of John, as well as many places throughout the Old and New Testaments. We'll come back in a later video to look in more detail at the prophecies in the ancient writings that we know as the Scriptures that foretell the return of this entity. Going forward in this discussion, we will encounter facts and details that are frankly unbelievable. They don't entirely fit with the standard mold of what we've always been taught about the solar system. In order to obtain an accurate and reliable perspective on a subject like this, perhaps one of the first essential steps is to have solid evidence. And we do have evidence. Over the past few years, my research, as well as the observations and work of many others, has accumulated a large amount of photographic and video data in which we can see with our own eyes a host of astonishing objects and effects brought on by the approach of this Planet X Nibiru system. In a moment, we'll look at a profound example of this photographic evidence that I'm referring to. But first, for those who don't know, let's address this word Nibiru. Where does this come from, and what is it? In the world's oldest library, the Library of Ashurbanipal, are contained thousands of clay tablets bearing cuneiform text from Babylonian and Sumerian ancient civilizations. Among these are texts in which the Sumerians talk about Planet X, and they have a name for it, Nibiru, which translated means Planet of the Crossing. We turn now to observe an extraordinary event that is typical of things becoming more and more clearly manifest in the heavens around us. Here we have a view from a webcam in Cozumel, Mexico. And from the time display in the upper right corner, you can see that it's 6:38 in the evening. We'll need to address this question here. With regular news, it really is true that after a week or two goes by, a large part of it becomes totally irrelevant. For example, most people couldn't care less about what the football scores are or what the weather forecast is from 3 months ago. Well, that dynamic does not apply here. This situation does not operate on the same scale as the weekly or even the yearly passing news. The observations and events pertaining to the approach of the Planet X system are vitally relevant from 5 years ago as much as those things that are happening now. In the long course of its orbit, from aphelion, which is the farthest point from the Sun, it takes literally many centuries to complete the journey back to the inner solar system. Thus, 5 or even 15 years of it becoming increasingly manifest is well within the time frame of being currently relevant and applicable with up-to-date status evaluations. We return now to our examination of the October 8, 2017 event captured on the Cozumel, Mexico webcam. The sky looks rather astonishing somehow. What are we looking at here? First thing we need to know is what direction is this webcam facing? And the answer is west. Affirming this is our view here from the same camera in the evening approaching sunset. Next, we want to know what time was sunset on that day. And on October 8th, 2017, in Cozumel, the sunset was at 6:29 p.m. To be precise, at 18:29, the sun would be disappearing below the horizon. So by about 6:31 p.m., it will have fully descended below the horizon. So how do we explain this? The sun was set on the horizon and dropped below 8 minutes ago. Notice the intensity of the light that is still up even though the sun has gone down. And also, what is the cause or reason for that round dark patch there in the midst of it? At this stage, it is crucial to know that this photo is not enhanced or altered in any way. What we are seeing here is strictly what the camera recorded. The picture archives of Webcams de Mexico are comprised of images captured at 2-minute intervals. Let's look at a few more in this sequence to try and grasp what's going on here. Okay, we've backed up to the time mark of 1730. So we're approaching evening, and in the upper left corner we see the bright area where the sun is on its way down to sunset. And as you can see, there's another light area there, down closer to the horizon. Notice the color. It's different from the light patch in the upper part of the picture. We've got two separate light sources in the west evening sky. Now we must address the question, isn't this just one light source coming from the sun, but the dense cloud cover could be causing a separation that makes it seem like there are two light objects? And the answer to that question becomes evident as we examine further photographic data from this event, in the which it is affirmed that two separate celestial bodies are involved here. We are seeing here that the light of this object has intensified. Normally, the first thing we would presume is that this is the sun, getting nearer to sunset, but actually it's not. This isn't the sun. As we noted earlier, the sunset will be about 30 minutes from now at 1829. Moreover, the spot where the sun will meet the horizon does not correspond to the location of this light body. The sun will touch down over to the left of this. The dense cloud cover on this date didn't allow us a clear view of the sunset, but on the day before, on the 7th, we were able to capture a view. When filming the sun, cameras generate an occultation disk to protect the lens, so the black dot there is the sun. Let's progress a few more frames forward to see exactly where it meets the horizon. And there we have it. The sun is that little dot about to disappear below the horizon. And this is October 7th, 6:30 p.m. We can use the pier there as a visual reference point for the spot where the sun touches down, compared to this. Okay, I've put an arrow to indicate exactly where the sun meets the horizon. The valuable point of all this scrutiny is that we have established that that bright object is not the sun. There's no question or doubt about it. We continue on now through the sequence of images from this evening. Those last 5 captures are astonishing and baffling. The large, round, dark object is in fact a huge planetary body. However, it's pretty much futile to say that here, because it's just simply unbelievable. During these 5 video frames that are repeating here, it's crucial to understand and remember that this stuff we're seeing is not in Earth's atmosphere, the way, for example, all of our clouds would be. We need to picture that out in space, toward where the sun is, somewhere out in that distance is this celestial body, plus all the other components of this mess. Naturally, for most all of us, the mind will just automatically generate a wall of questions that effectively cancel out any possibility that this could be some huge intruder into our solar system that is not one of the 9 planets we've always known about. If that's a planetary body, why aren't we getting major effects of the gravity? And why aren't backyard astronomers seeing it with their telescopes? Yes, there are all kinds of questions that deserve to be answered. And the thing is, there are answers and explanations to much of these. But there's also a lot going on here that is outside of our frame of reference. and we just don't know. However, we're seeing it with our own eyes. This footage from Cozumel on that evening is only one little example out of hundreds of data points that we could go through that establish the conclusion that Planet X, using that term generally over the broad subject, is real. There is a body of evidence that qualifies on the level of proof that not only is it real, but it's back. Let's get started. Our solar system has an additional group of planets that we never heard about in school. The main central body in this other group is understood to be a gas giant and is considered to be under the classification of what would be a red dwarf. It also classifies as being a star, as opposed to just a humble planet. Indeed, one of its appellations is the dark star. It doesn't give off light, however, it does radiate in the infrared spectrum. This enigmatic celestial body is also understood to be the binary counterpart of our Sun. In other words, our solar system is a binary system. Now, this is not strange or uncommon, because astronomical surveys and studies have revealed that the majority of stars and systems are in a binary star configuration. A binary system is simply one in which two stars orbit around a common center of mass. That is, they are gravitationally bound to each other. Actually, most stars are in binary systems. Perhaps up to 85% of stars are in binary systems. Now, a very common argument and rebuttal that is raised against this general subject of Planet X, Nibiru, Nemesis, is that people say that if this was anything real, then surely it would be spoken of in the news and by the mainstream media. And this is a logical query to raise. And the fact is, there have been a number of articles or news blasts from the ranks of officialdom making various statements relating to this. However, it really is a two-sided coin. And whenever something is let out, it seems to be somehow swept back under the rug. Let's watch a clip from a documentary I did last year that gives a few details about news bursts and Planet X. Let's take a moment to revisit a news article from 1983. Probably everyone who has investigated the subject of Planet X Nibiru will have already seen this article and several others like it that came out in that brief period of disclosure back in 1983 and around that time. Headline: Mystery Heavenly Body Discovered. A heavenly body, possibly as large as the giant planet Jupiter, and possibly so close to Earth that it would be part of this solar system, has been found in the direction of the constellation Orion by an orbiting telescope aboard the infrared astronomical satellite. Around the time of the Washington Post article, there were a few other news agencies announcing the same disclosure. However, immediately following these astounding reports of an additional planet the size of Jupiter in our solar system, these same newspapers and agencies seem to entirely forget about the whole thing. So here we are more than 30 years later, and the bottom line, it's back. Let's watch a short video clip now that came out in 2011 on CNN News.
you to vote on the news, and here's the winner. There's a huge, hidden, heavenly body right here in our solar system. Evidence is mounting that either a brown dwarf star or a gas giant planet is lurking at the outermost reaches of our solar system, far beyond the planet Pluto. According to the British newspaper The Independent, the object is 4 times the size of Jupiter. Experts say the presence of such a massive object could explain why a barrage of comets has been coming from that direction. We'll post.
Wow. I think that's quite interesting for such a direct, clear statement to come from a prominent establishment gatekeeper such as CNN. I'd like to watch that once more.
You to vote on the news, and here's the winner. There's a huge, hidden, heavenly body right here in our solar system. Evidence is mounting that either a brown dwarf star or a gas giant planet is lurking at the outermost reaches of our solar system, far beyond the planet Pluto. According to the British newspaper The Independent, the object is 4 times the size of Jupiter. Experts say the presence of such a massive object.
So we saw the broadcaster there report the size of this object being 4 times the size of Jupiter. However, there are various different statements regarding this, ranging from 4 times the size of Earth to about 8 times the size of Jupiter. So what is the size of this brown dwarf, this dark star, that we see clues adding up, pointing to it being in our solar system? Is it as big as the Earth? Or is it comparable in size to the Sun? Well, one of the more recent statements on this that is potentially highly accurate for reasons that we'll cover as we go on, places the size of this dark star to be a little larger than Jupiter, and to be exact, 1.2 times the size of Jupiter. To comprehend the size of this planet, it's helpful to know that you could fit all of the other planets in the solar system inside of Jupiter. A more accurate way to illustrate this is that you could fit 1,300 Earths inside of Jupiter. Another factor that is crucial to understanding the Planet X Nibiru scenario is that we are dealing with not a planet that is coming into our solar system, but an entire system of planets, a miniature solar system, if you will. The central body, the red dwarf that we've spoken of, is the equivalent of the Sun in this other system. Orbiting that central body are 7 planets, the size of which are comparable to the Earth. 7 Earth-sized planets. This illustration shows a size comparison between the known 4 planets of our inner solar system and the 7 planets of the Nemesis system. Now you'll notice in this illustration that the other system is labeled TRAPPIST-1. For those who don't know what that is, we need to take a moment and outline this. TRAPPIST-1 is a red dwarf star. It is named after the observatory telescope in Chile, known as TRAPPIST, from which the initial observations were made. Announcement of its discovery, with 3 planets orbiting, was made in 2015. In a press release on the 22nd of February 2017, NASA announced the discovery of 4 additional planets, making a total of 7 planets orbiting the dwarf star. Let's glance at a few of those press releases. Here's an article from Popular Mechanics, dated 22nd of February 2017. 7 Earth-like planets orbit one nearby star. The red dwarf has 7 alien planets, the size of Earth, giving TRAPPIST-1 more potentially habitable worlds than any other star we know about. Here's an informative article from the ESO, that's the European Southern Observatory, again announcing TRAPPIST-1 and the 7 Earth-sized planets. Here we have an article from National Geographic, again dated 22nd of February 2017. 7 alien Earths found orbiting a nearby star. You can see there that it goes on to say that this is 39 light years away from Earth. To be exact, they've declared it to be 39.6 light years away. So the official line is that this is nowhere near our solar system. However, there are a number of queries, conflicts, and anomalies with their story. The detail in question is the stated location and distance of this planetary system. Again, the consistent word from NASA on this is that it's about 40 light years away, which places it well outside of our solar system. Thus, obviously, if this is the case, then applying the data regarding the TRAPPIST-1 system to a supposed red dwarf star and its planets here in our solar system, well, that would be totally erroneous, and the TRAPPIST-1 system data would be irrelevant. The actual situation is the planetary and orbital data packaged in the TRAPPIST-1 announcement is a high-level disclosure of the actual facts and data regarding this mess right here in our solar system. Of course, there is a lot of further information about this, but for our present discussion, we'll move on to expand our overview a little more of this Planet X situation. Let's look at one random example of how there are literally thousands of unrelated events and details occurring that all potentially correspond to this subject. This photograph was taken by a friend of mine in July of 2017. She was out one summer evening and decided to just snap a few pictures of the late evening sky. You zoom in on the moon and everything looks normal. Now turning to the next photo, and as we zoom in closer, something very peculiar becomes clearly visible. Now, to quote Linda when she showed me this photo, "What is that?" Now, the larger bright object is the moon. And remember that all of the light we see there is actually from the sun. The moon is only bright by reflecting light from the sun. That second object there is the same situation. It's a planetary body in space much further away from us than the moon, yet still within a near enough proximity to catch light from the sun in the same way that the moon is doing here. It is worthwhile to note that in addition to the illuminated part, with a closer look, we also can see the round body of this planetary object. I've stated earlier, but want to firmly establish the point. This is not just a reflection or drop of rain on the lens. We are seeing an anomalous heavenly body that by sheer chance happened to be out in space within the viewpoint of Linda's camera at that moment. The persuasive strength of Linda's photo, taken in July of 2017 from England, is magnified as we bring in an entirely different source, a video clip taken also in July of 2017, but from the other side of the world. This one is from Kansas. So again, the bright body is the moon, and the idea that the anomalous sphere is just a lens reflection is defeated by the fact that the clouds move over and cover the second object. So here we have two totally unrelated individuals photographing the moon, one from St. Leonard's, England, and one from Kansas, USA, both in July of 2017, and both of them capturing an anomalous spherical body in the field of view with the moon. Let's look at another example of the extraordinary visual manifestations that are becoming more and more frequent and prominent. Here we have the Aviation Weather Cameras Network of Alaska. We'll look at some footage from the camera located at Nunapitchuk. The date and time is 6th of June, 2018, 8:58 in the morning. And our view is from the Nunapitchuk east-facing weather cam. The position of the sun at this time is off to the upper left, outside of the camera's view range. And of course, the main point of interest for us here is this. What is that? The first obvious potential answer is it's the moon. And to me, that does correspond to the way the moon can often appear. So we go now to verify that it is the moon. And it's not the moon. For this specific date, time, and location, the visible position of the moon is in the south sky. This weather cam is east-facing, and in its field of view, there is no south element. Moreover, as we proceed through the continuing frames of this sequence, it becomes clearly evident that it is not the moon. One interesting and very compelling aspect of what we have here is that we can actually see details of the surface. And further, we can see that the planet is rotating. This helps to resolve and settle the question that might still linger in our minds, the question we've already addressed, but we'll raise it again. Isn't this somehow just the moon? For one, the moon is in locked rotation with the Earth, always showing the same face, the same side toward us. But with this mysterious planetary body, we can see that it's doing complete full rotation. And also, those markings do not correspond to the distinctive shapes and features on our moon. And yet there is one other factor that irrefutably establishes this is not the moon. On the date when this footage occurred, the moon was in the third quarter phase. In other words, to see the moon on that date, you'd be seeing only a half moon, which doesn't match up with this. Now, this is highly extraordinary, to the point of being unbelievable, to be seeing what seems to be an unknown planet right there moving across the Alaska sky. So any additional data that can be brought forward to establish the veracity or expose the errors of what we're seeing and understanding here, well, then that would be worthwhile. So on that note, we turn now to an entirely different weathercam location. We go now to the 14th of June to a location named Good News Bay. Okay, we'll repeat that sequence of images here to make some observations. So we're seeing this object here at Good News Bay, the same as we were looking at in footage from the weathercam at Nunapitchuk. And we can see again that this body is rotating on its axis. There are problems with trying to make sense of this, however. Various characteristics of this apparition sustain a likelihood that it is a refraction, or in other words, a reflection of sorts. Now, even if it is a refraction and not the actual body, an example should be taken from, say, a mirror. You're looking at a mirror, and then you see a person or a bird pass by in that mirror. And okay, what you saw was only the reflection. You didn't see the actual person or the bird. But nevertheless, the reflection was only there because the source of it was present. Now, for the scope of this video, it is not our intent to conduct an intensive, full-scale examination of this photo sequence from the Alaska Aviation Weathercam Network. And there are literally hundreds of similar situations caught on those weather cams. So rather than spend hours scrutinizing one situation, Our intent is more to brush over a wider range of examples and data to formulate a qualified overview. Before moving on from the Alaska weather cams, I'd like to have us look at one more significant detail in those last frames from Good News Bay. Here we have the image capture for 7:31 p.m. or 1931 hours. Now, in our conversation so far, we've been mainly focusing our interest on this object. We've noted that it may very well be a refraction or reflection of the actual source. Now, notice this area further up, just below the sun. At first glance of this picture, that detail is where my attention will be drawn to. And for those who can see it, you're looking at one of the planetary objects of the Nemesis system, showing through the distance of space, located further out in our solar system in the same direction of where the sun is. And here we are about a half hour later. Yes, this observation is visually quite obscure and faint. Nevertheless, it is highly significant in the information that it suggests. Let's turn now to observe an event where it's a lot easier to see that something extraordinary is going on. Here we have a view from the webcam at Nuevo Vallarta, Mexico. The date is 2018, August 26th, and the time is about 20 past 8 in the morning. In this video footage, captured from the live stream of the Hard Rock Hotel webcam, at first glance it seems that we have a view of the morning sunrise. However, this webcam is facing west, and the morning sun is never in that view that we're looking at. In fact, if you want to watch the sun set, this is where we would look. Here's a few frames from later the same day in the evening, and it's not a very clear view, but the sun is setting there. We have a clearer view from a couple days later that plainly establishes this is the west horizon where the sun sets, not where the sun rises. So, continuing our video footage from the morning, we have to ask, what is that? A moment ago, we took in a view of the evening from here, establishing that this is where the sun sets. If somehow that wasn't enough to get it to sink in to our minds, here's a few frames from August 23rd, a bright, sunny morning, where we can see the shadows cast from the rising sun behind us, and the shadows are withdrawing in accordance with the upward movement of the sun. Back again with our event from August 26th. Let's speed up the playback to observe a time span of it. So again, we raise the question, what is that light over there? We've demonstrated that it can't be the sun. It can't be the moon. There's a whole list of reasons why that's out of the question. So if it's neither of those, and to go straight to the answer, it is an anomalous celestial body, as we have discussed. The light radiating from it is not from the planetary body itself. It's from the sun's light being reflected powerfully in the same way that the sun's light illuminates the moon for us. We can corroborate this view by turning to a different webcam location. We're now at Puerto Vallarta, and it's the same morning that we've just been looking at, August 26th, and again facing the west horizon. We're seeing the same object that we were looking at on the Hard Rock Hotel webcam. So this map gives us a convenient overview of the location of these two webcams. One at Hard Rock Hotel, and the footage we're looking at now is from the Fiesta Americana resort. The sound from the video changed up to a higher pitch because I've sped up the footage again. We should not underestimate how extraordinary this is. In order to grasp the magnitude of what we see here, it is crucial that we have a couple basic data points in hand. For example, if this is an east-facing webcam at about 8 in the morning, then we have nothing to get excited about. But the fact that this is a west-facing view changes the game entirely. What we're seeing here is not normal. Now, in addition to the radiant circular object, I'd like to draw our attention to this darker round thing. Now, I know it's a lot to take in and it's hard to believe, but we're seeing at least 2 major planetary bodies right here. One of them radiating light somehow, and the other, as we see, is remaining dark. I spent over a year ignoring those darker objects, just putting it down to coincidental cloud formations that are just happen to be round. But the accumulation of data and observations about all of this gave rise to the solid basis upon which to understand that no, these are not coincidental round cloud formations. I'm not saying that every round shape in the sky is one of these planets. Not saying that at all. But this one, for example, is. We've noted that there are at least 2 planetary bodies in this view. Perhaps it's worthwhile to grab a reminder that this alien system we're talking about apparently has 7 Earth-sized planets in its constitution. And indeed, it is common in this research to see multiple objects at the same time. We'll move now to the date of August 18th, 2018, location Acapulco, to have a look at one more example of extraordinary light in the sky due to the arrival and the presence of these foreign entities. Acapulco, overlooking El Morro Beach, webcam view from the south-facing side of the luxurious Emporio Hotel. Let's start at about 6:30 in the morning and see what unfolds from there. Just for your information, we'll be skipping forward in the video to fit nearly an hour of footage down into maybe 3 minutes. And again, we'll note that this is pretty much a south-facing view, slightly to the southwest. I'd like to draw your attention to this faintly visible activity about center screen. Under normal, regular conditions, throughout my entire life, something like this would never be something to take notice of. It's just clouds or mist, or maybe the smoke from a bonfire. In other words, that bit of cloud or mist, or whatever it is up there, would always be simply due to the regular processes in the daily routine of life on planet Earth. But we are living in an extraordinary time, where things are unfolding that have not been seen since the days of ancient Egypt. Now, this faint object we've been observing is in fact part of the unbelievable situation that we've been talking about. Let's skip ahead about 10 minutes. So here we are at about 7:15 in the morning, and we know that all that radiance and illuminated activity is not the sunrise. The first obvious reason is, remember, we've been watching this spot since about 6:30 in the morning, from when it was dark, and there was never a sunrise. And aside from that, remember, we're looking due south, and the actual sunrise comes from behind us. On a different matter, You will have noticed in this footage and in earlier examples that we've looked at, there are sudden fluctuations in the brightness and spread of the illumination. It's important to understand that that effect is not occurring because of a camera fluctuation or anything of that type. This whole phenomenon that we're dealing with is accompanied by flashes, pulses, and fluctuations in the spread of light constantly. And the sun also. We could make an entire 2-hour video, at least, with demonstrations of how the sun is undergoing convulsive fluctuations. We'll have to cover that subject in the next video, as there won't really be time to address it here. Notice the apex of the light area. Thus, we are seeing the source object of this. We also have a darker object. It's round, and to be blunt, it's a planetary body, as we discussed earlier. A few minutes ago, I mentioned that it's not uncommon to have multiple objects visible at the same time. And so, on that note, we should raise a query and give consideration to this, in addition to the 2 other main items we've already pointed out. Incidentally, while we're on the point of noticing these darker bodies, it's helpful to recall that way back at the beginning stages of this event, we could persistently see a spherical object there. Rather faint and only intermittently visible, but there. It's not just the main planetary bodies that have the potential to be showing up in this. There is also the central body, the dark star. Also, it's known that some of those planets actually have moons. So you've got 7 planets, some of them have moons, the dark star, and then to top it all off, a lot of these things are dragging huge fields of debris, which could be rocks or ice, dust, plasma, and frankly, who knows what else. We must remember that in this broad situation, we cannot expect all of it to fit into a framework that can be given a satisfactory explanation. There is a plethora of unknown factors for which we have no point of reference and that we are, frankly, unaware of. As we get ready to leave El Morro Beach, I'd like to reiterate the basic key factors that the direction of our view is south-southwest, and it's about 20 past 7 in the morning. So, as with the previous examples, we must ask again, how can there be an intensive dynamic light source such as we see here in that sky? Because according to all of the standard and regularly accepted factors of our solar system, this can't be happening. And it would appear that according to our news and media, it's not happening. Speaking of the news, let's talk about that for a moment. You know how if there's a plane crash, or if a school burns down, or if a large meteoric fireball streaks across the sky, or if David Beckham buys a new pair of shoes, well, these things become the blazing headlines of our daily tabloids and TV traffic. Now consider the event captured live on video and playing on the screen in front of us. This should be headline news. From Tokyo to Texas, Moscow to Melbourne, the magnitude of what is brewing in front of our eyes here should be blazoned across the front page of newspapers.